live. Yes. Hello and good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. We were just counting up, so this is our fifth community conversation. So high five for number five. Really glad to be here today in the very heart of our city in downtown. I am overlooking a very busy Churchill Square right now. It's a beautiful, beautiful evening and lovely to be here with you all at Stanley Milner Library. I'm going to start just briefly, as I always do, with a bit of an update in terms of things that have been happening since the last community conversation that we had. And then my favorite part is just to open it up to questions. So we've got a couple folks here in person. Thank you so much for coming down. And I don't know if we have anyone online yet, but if you're online and you have questions, you can just type them in. And I have Lean here helping to moderate that. So she'll send your questions out. So just want to start with some updates on transit safety. So, definitely we've seen some positive news in terms of our ridership getting up to pre-pandemic levels on buses, which is absolutely outstanding. But we know that safety continues to be a concern for folks using the system and something that we want to be constantly increasing. So one of the most important things we've done is, as council, we've asked for monthly updates on transit safety, how those initiatives are going and what trends we're seeing. So really pleased, we've had effectively two of those presentations so far. One was sort of in response to a report, but I'm excited to get into that monthly rhythm and hear those frequent updates. And some of the key pieces of information. So I will say I have written a blog with all the information on transit safety initiatives that you may wish to check out if you wanted more detail. But some key highlights include increasing our transit police officers, so it's about a 20% increase. We've launched the bystander awareness program. We've seen additional investment in EPS from ourselves with an additional $7 million operating funding this year compared to last year. There was an announcement from the province in terms of 50 additional officers for transit safety as well, which is very exciting. We've also been working on some of and in terms of response as well, the REACH crisis diversion, we're looking to expand their ability to respond and support safety on transit. And looking at some of those underlying causes as well, continuing to invest in shelters and our homelessness strategy. Which links really closely to something I've been hearing a lot about as well, is encampments. So definitely continuing to see encampments throughout throughout the ward and the city as a whole. And I know that causes a lot of concerns for many residents, many businesses, and of course isn't the type of conditions that we want folks to be living in at all. City staff came back with an enhanced encampment response recently that I'm really pleased with. I think it's the right approach. It really focuses on providing clear, consistent, and rapid connections to supports and housing for folks who are living in encampments, and also continue to ensure that encampments don't pose public health and safety risks to folks living in the encampments and also surrounding residents and businesses. It's definitely, I don't think it's a huge direction shift to what we were doing last year. But I think what we found last year is that only focusing on clearing encampments didn't really solve a problem. So what I experienced was, when there would be a sweep in one area, we would just start hearing from another area. So the problem wasn't being solved in any way, it was just being moved around. So I think the new approach, which again is still focused on safety, but creating those connections to housing, I think is really, really positive. Sort of tied to this, another thing that's really great to be talking about this time of year, even though it's very warm right now, we started discussing our winter shelter strategy. And we shouldn't ever be surprised that winter is coming, but we often find ourselves scrambling at the last minute to address shelter needs over the cold months. So I'm pleased that work is underway. We're looking at some different models in terms of smaller sites throughout the city, which I think will be really positive. We did fund a shelter space in Jasper Place on the Stony Plain Road area last year. It's going to be continuing towards the end of this year, so again looking to maintain those spaces moving forward. And it's something obviously that we're going to continue advocating with the province with. So now that we have the new government in place, just in continuing to have those conversations at this time of year so that we're not caught unprepared for the upcoming winter. We've continued investing in some of the support services and spaces where people can be during the winter time, including funding Boyle Street and Bissell Centre as well for their ongoing services. Some other exciting things that are happening, and very, very apt in terms of where we are right now, is looking at some investment options for people who are looking to convert office space to residential, or just build new residential in the downtown. So looking to increase our residential population in the core of the city, which I'm really excited about. That's coming back in September, so we'll have some options there that I'm looking forward to supporting. Another really exciting one, I think it's exciting, we've introduced the derelict property tax. So this means that starting in 2024, property owners who have residential properties that aren't well kept, that are boarded up, that aren't habitable, they will now face sort of a property tax rate that's 3 times the baseline. So the intent is really to provide a financial incentive for property owners of derelict properties to address that, to either reinvest in the building or to demolish it. Leaving them as they are creates a ton of safety issues, challenges, and really detracts from the whole community. So I'm looking forward to those coming into place, and I don't know if it has anything to do with it, but we've seen a very long-lasting pit of despair on 102nd Avenue, the old Arlington site. That has recently been filled in. So again, I don't know if it's related to the derelict subclass, but hopefully the word is getting out that we are really taking derelict and problem properties seriously and bringing different tools to bear on that. Just wanted to touch on too that we had a presentation from the Edmonton Police Commission, which I also sit on at council, just setting out a framework to improve communication and information sharing between council and commission. So, up until this point, we haven't had any, really clearly set out checkpoints for conversation between council and commission, sharing the commission's strategic plan, sharing the annual report. So I'm really looking forward to that. I think there'll be some great opportunities for further dialogue and discussion. The Commission's also doing some great work in terms of making it more accessible to watch Commission meetings, so actually recording those meetings, having them posted online so people can come back to them if they aren't able to attend in person. I'll end with some exciting news on a number of fronts. So for those of you living on the west end of Jasper Ave, which we have someone in the audience who's on that side of things, we know that Imagine Jasper, we saw those streetscape improvements along Jasper Ave to 1 and 15. We provisionally funded those from 115th Street to 124th Street, but contingent on some federal funding coming through. So I'm really pleased to share that federal funding has come through, and so those upgrades, from 114th Street to 124th Street will happen in this budget cycle. So really looking forward to replacing those crumbling curbs. Also, just so excited, we received $19.5 million through the National Housing Co-Investment Fund to reinvest in our existing affordable housing stock, and these units are sort of the very deep subsidy units, the ones that provide sort of the most affordable options. It's phenomenal that we're getting this investment to put back into those units, ensure they're refurbished and that they will last for another generation. I'll also touch on, sorry, there's so much good news, I forgot about this one. We'll also be receiving from, I think it's the federal government, $80 million over 5 years towards the Canadian Critical Drug Initiative in Edmonton, which is an integrated research, development, and manufacturing initiative led by Applied Pharmaceutical Innovations, which is a non-for-profit organization in partnership with the University of Alberta. It really positions Edmonton and our region to become a leader in manufacturing for critical pharmaceuticals. We also received a $23.7 million grant for the Blatchford Renewable Energy System. Also great news, great opportunity to support the efforts that we're making as a city to decarbonize our heating and cooling systems. So that was a lot, but lots going on as always. Yeah, I would love to open it up for questions now. Would love love to hear what people are thinking. What's on anyone's mind? Not to put anyone on the spot. Do we have any online questions come through yet? No online questions so far. Greg? Yeah.
I'd like to get through my questions. Good evening, Anne.
And sorry, Greg, and maybe we'll just take turns. We'll maybe just do one question and then we can go to another question.
There's a lot of concerns in this ward, and it's nice of you to paint a picture that everything's nice, but for example, just on the way here and in the last few hours, I've witnessed 2 instances of open drug use, one man harassing young women on the street, and a lot of other disorders. That's just on the way here. It's a severe problem, and it needs to be addressed. It can't be a narrative that, oh, we're working with the social agencies, oh, yada yada encampments. Where is the initiative from our mayor? He's the leader of the city. He needs to be vocal. Okay, he is not an effective leader.
Okay, so we can start with that first question. So
That's not a question.
Okay.
I came here for a specific reason. I'm going to summarize my point in two points I want to make. First of all, while at City Hall for my presentation earlier this week, I noticed that the city gives their Treaty 6 acknowledgement, and then they mention settlers. I take exception to that because I was born in this country. I'm not a settler. Okay, so that leads me to, along this line, the city has the anti-racism committee and if you look at the language used, it seems to paint a picture that only minorities are subject to racism. It doesn't acknowledge that there's also, I'm Caucasian, as are you, and there is, guilt-tripping people who might be white. It does exist. So if you want to talk about racism, you can't use a reverse racism perspective, which is very obvious that's what's taking place from the city. So I want to call out that the city shouldn't be calling people settlers. That's absurd. And I think I could say a whole bunch more, but I'm going to get out of here. The other thing I'll say, which is pretty important as far as I'm concerned, the intersection, which I've told you about at Bellamy Hill and 97th Avenue, is dangerous. And all that it is, all the city's changed is they've made a timer now. So now the pedestrian sees a clock, 24 seconds to cross that intersection. But it's incredibly dangerous. So you'd have to see for yourself. You have to go there during rush hour. See for yourself. And you know what? I said I'd only make 2 points. I'm gonna hold it to that. But yeah, the city has to really clean up the drug use. It's completely unacceptable. This ward is a mess. I'm sorry, it's a mess, Anne. We need leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Greg. Thanks for coming. Really appreciate the points you've raised. I mean, I think open drug use is obviously something we don't want to be seeing in our city. It's troubling. It's reflective of a lack of health services that people need access to. So we did fund a drug poisoning response, municipal drug poisoning response, which was really intended to coordinate some of the on-the-ground efforts that are being made.
The problem is that it leads to too much conflict. You know how there's that large stairwell where we met briefly. I come up that stairwell frequently on a daily basis. I came up that stairwell to come here this evening. 2 people doing open drugs on there. I'm not going to pretend it's not happening. I say, hey, I'd appreciate if you wouldn't do drugs here. I don't want to smell this. And then that's when the attitude begins, and it turns into, I'll do whatever the heck I want. And I'm like, well, you F right off. I'll say whatever the hell I want. And that's where the conflict arises. And I'm not going to budge. Okay, and a lot of people feel like me. I know people have problems. I'm not going to budge. I'm tired of the problems. Something needs to be done with it.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I'm really hoping to continue to see investment in health services that people need to address drug addictions. So
but it's also, sorry, I'm going to get out of here. It's a choice. We're all responsible for our choices. We can say if they need health services, they're choosing to do drugs in my community. Okay, that's a choice.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. Sorry, I do disagree with you. I think that choice is a really complicated term.
So you're saying it's acceptable to have the open drug use?
I'm not saying it's acceptable at all. I'm also saying that I think that people don't have full choice when it's matters of addictions.
Fair enough. Some people are addicted. It's a brain chemistry thing. Fair enough. But don't you recognize we need to push back against that? We need to work with the provincial government, get these people the hell off the streets. They need an intervention. They don't need compassion. They need an intervention. Okay? Because some of them are violent, and It's just, I don't want open drug use, end of story.
Yeah, and I agree. I think the province is the right partner for this, being the deliverer of health services, so agree absolutely.
And the safety stuff on the transit, that's nonsense. That's just silly. Like, if there's an assault, this is what you gotta speak up about. I mean, come on, that should be taken down. The intentions are positive, but it's a lot of people are laughing at that. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Greg. Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Yeah, well, Greg has gone, but I did want to touch on some of the comments he made as well in terms of how we talk about race and some of the more difficult conversations we have in a community around reconciliation and anti-racism. So, you know, I think that the term settler is used to talk about folks that are not Indigenous, who don't have generations of family history from time immemorial in Canada. So I'm a descendant of settlers, and I do take his point. I guess there is a distinction between being a settler, who may be a newcomer to Canada, versus a descendant of a settler. But I don't think that denotes anything positive or negative about someone. It just is a true statement about our identities and our backgrounds and our histories. I'm very privileged to be a settler in this community and on these lands, and for me it's a way to reflect the fact that what my position is and the work that I need to do as a settler in reconciliation. I think in terms of reverse racism, I'm uncomfortable with that term. I think that obviously we don't ever want to have language that persecutes individuals for their identity, whatever their race. But I think reverse racism is usually used when people feel really uncomfortable about a conversation and maybe their own whiteness. So it can be hard to have our privilege called out. It can be deeply uncomfortable, and that can feel like an attack. I think we can reflect on that about maybe it's more just an invitation to reflect on the privileges we have, on the discomfort it creates for us, and try to continue that conversation moving forward. It's interesting, Greg talked a little bit about guilt, and I do think that sometimes our negative reactions or our anger is rooted in a sense of guilt, which can be hard to deal with if you don't know that guilt is the feeling that you're feeling. So always important issues to talk about, and appreciate Greg providing us the opportunity to do so. Any questions coming in online?
No.
No? Okay.
There's only a comment that said, "Thank you for bringing this up, sir."
Thank you.
For Greg.
Oh, sure. That's great. Well, I will open the floor to anyone else who may have questions.
Cool.
Carl.
Great. So maybe if you could expand on the funding, the federal funding having come through for Jasper over 115th to 124th. Obviously very welcome news. Been on the cards for some years now, and I think there's a real opportunity for us as a community to learn from the implementation between 109th and 114th, and perhaps make some improvements, let's say, for the subsequent section. So I need to acquaint myself with how much is set in stone and versus how much is up for debate, if you like. And could you perhaps give us an idea of where that's at the moment?
Yeah, great question. That was also my initial instinct. So I will say, I think the streetscaping along Jasper Ave is so beautiful. I think the material choice, the furniture, the plantings are great. The thing that I still struggle with is the width of the road. So 5 lanes, again, better than 7 lanes. But, 5 lanes is kind of that distance where, I don't know how comfortable I'm going to feel sending my daughter walking across Jasper Ave on her own. So I did reach out to, sorry, I'm just seeing some folks that we know walking by the window. So I reached out to the infrastructure team as well and said, hey, what are the options here for looking at some road narrowing? And they very firmly expressed that, we are sticking with the designs. The main challenge just be in terms of changing a road profile halfway through a stretch of road can be really, really damaging. Or, not damaging, but it can create a lot of conflict in terms of how that traffic is flowing. My understanding, and I need to revisit the designs as well, but my understanding is that west of 116th Street, there are parts where it is 4 lanes. So especially coming around that curve from 124th Street, my understanding is that there are portions that are narrower, and then it kind of opens up. So I'd like to investigate that more, just to ensure that that is the case, that we're taking all the opportunities that exist. I also take the point, which I think is a really good one to remember, is that we will be losing a lot of lanes on 104th Avenue, that's going to be primarily focused on the LRT and other users. So again, appreciating that that's a bit of a trade-off. It has also made me really reflect on, because again, we don't really want council weighing in on a project by project basis, so maybe really thinking too about what maybe we need to go back to and revisit in our complete street guidelines at a more strategic level. And again, I'm probably, if any city staff listen to this, and I don't want to spook them, but some ideas that are percolating for me is, do we sort of set maximum lane widths or spans before you have to have planting of some sort, right? Because I think not only is there that crossing issue, there's the climate change, the climate mitigation, right? That tarmac is so hot, that contributes to urban heat island effect. So do we start looking at some policies around, if you have more than a 4-lane road, then you need a central boulevard, which provides a refuge for pedestrians as well. So that was a very long answer to your question, but my understanding is that, the designs are fairly set in stone. But I think there's opportunities to improve sort of at that policy level as well.
Right.
Ah.
Okay, we have 2 questions. So, Terrace Carblock says it is causing conflict between races. Why now all of a sudden you care about Native people?
So I think the rights of Indigenous peoples have been important forever. I think it's been neglected for a long time, so happy that we are now reckoning with that as a society. It's a very dark, long history in terms of how Indigenous peoples have been treated in our country. So I welcome the opportunity. I don't believe it is increasing conflict. I think it's actually creating opportunities for connection, for learning, for stronger communities when we're all able to communicate, to understand each other, and work together.
And there's another question. Monica says, I'm curious what the status of the 107th Ave revitalization is. I would love to see a pedestrian crosswalk at 107th Ave and 108th Street as well. Something as simple as painted lines and a pedestrian sign would be beneficial to our neighborhood. We are part of a capital boulevard, yet 107th crossing feels like a divide of the neighborhood.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to visualize 107th Ave and 108th Street?
Yeah.
Like, is that, I'm just trying to think, why can't I visualize that? I'm picturing 106, I keep picturing 104. Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, no, thank you, I appreciate the question. So, as you likely know from your question, there is funding to be revitalizing a stretch of 107th Avenue. I really apologize, I don't have the dates at my fingertips, but I believe it's certainly within this budget cycle, so it's budgeted for, I believe construction is starting soon. If you want to share your contact information, we can follow up with those exact dates. The one, so when we consider Imagine Jasper Ave, that's what we call a complete reconstruction. So all the curbs are broken up, and that gives us the opportunity to kind of change the curb locations. We can make sidewalks wider. With the 107th Ave, that's not quite at a reconstruction time frame. So we want to get the best use out of the infrastructure that we have. So we're not going to be breaking the curbs. So the curb line is going to stay the same, but what's going to improve is some of the materials and the other amenities that are on the street. I think in terms of the crossing, that's a really interesting one. And I wonder, we could follow up offline if you want to send an email to the office, and we could explore that idea further. There's a program called Street Labs. It's part of our Vision Zero work, and it's a program where communities who have an idea to have an intervention in traffic in their community can submit a form and then the team does an assessment, and then they can do things like you've mentioned, like painting the crosswalk, putting planters in at the crosswalk to kind of create a bit more of a buffer. So lots of options there. You may want to check that out. So again, it would be Street Labs. You could probably Google Vision Zero Street Labs and it would come up. And yeah, it's a great program. I think it's doing lots of great different interventions across the city. Yeah, thank you for the question. And again, please let us know if you want to send us an email or put your email in the chat, and we can follow up with the details on that.
She says thank you, and there are a multitude of people crossing unsafely every single day.
Okay. Well, yeah, thanks. I mean, that's what Vision Zero. So just a bit of context. So Vision Zero is the city's commitment to get to zero traffic fatalities. So a lot of that is just those small interventions to make sure that people are safer. And I'm just trying to, my memory is that there's not even a flashing light at 108th and 107th, is there? I don't think. I guess you can't answer unless you want to chat it. But it's a great point. 107th is a busy road, and having some sort of controlled crossing is really important. I know that when I bike through the area, I'm just thinking of, it must be 104th. There's the flashing amber lights there, but yeah, they're not at every intersection, I don't think, on 107th. So yeah, thanks for flagging that. Any other questions in the room? You are both my constituents too, for the record. Yeah. No pressure, huh?
Maybe you'd like to expand, and I know you mentioned this just the other day, but the project Tensor is now being rolled out.
Yes.
And I recall seeing something about not just the amount of resources that are being put into the project, but KPIs or measures of success. And in your mind, what would represent a successful project? Because obviously a lot's sort of weighing on how this goes.
Yeah. Well, so there's many things. I mean, honestly, there's a very personal measure of success, which is, can I sleep with my windows open in the summer and not be woken up in the middle of the night? So I live close to the high level bridge. We get a lot of that noise. So what I am really interested to see is first of all, the number of tickets that are being issued, what that's looking like. And I'm really curious to see if the $1,000 fine, what impact that has in terms of, it's one of those funny things where I think initially we want to see an increase in tickets, and then eventually we want to be seeing that go down. The research that I've done suggests that a large fine isn't as big of a deterrent as the certainty that you'll likely be caught for what it is that you could get a ticket for. So I'm interested to see if that higher fine does translate to any sort of change of behavior. Again, research would suggest possibly, but maybe not. So what I'm really looking for, again, in our December budget deliberations, I moved to increase the budget for our traffic officers, so they could go out and do that work. That wasn't successful. So I'd really like to try again at the fall budget, get those resources in place. But yeah, I guess success for me is again the number of tickets, and then just that we see decreased violations over time. That's what's happened with other traffic initiatives around commercial vehicles. Started off with lots of tickets being issued, and then slowly over time those just whittle down, and that to me shows that it's being effective. And I appreciate when people write in, and I think that's another measure just in terms of how much of an impact it's having in the community and how much we hear about it. I hope that we're getting towards quieter streets. Any more questions online? No?
Good.
Okay. No pressure. What's something else I want to talk about? Maybe just coming up. I always sort of do the quarter in review, but coming up, we have a very, very busy fall coming up. Something I should really highlight and encourage people to get involved with is our zoning bylaw renewal program. So that is sort of a complete rewrite, truly the first real overhaul of our zoning bylaw in decades. I'm really excited. I mean, this is work that I did when I worked at the City of Edmonton, but it's a great opportunity to honestly just like simplify a very convoluted document. So even if you're not a home builder or a business owner, just being able to build a deck, that will be hopefully a much simpler process with the new zoning bylaw. But there's a number of engagement opportunities coming up. So the first, I think it's sort of considered like more of a final draft, but still room for feedback and changing, will be at Urban Planning Committee on June 20th. I keep mixing if it's 20th or 22. That will be June 20th at Urban Planning Committee, so I encourage you to sign up. You can be a speaker either virtually or you can come in person to speak to that. The timelines are basically, so Urban Planning Committee is an opportunity for sort of a touch point for us to hear from members of the public, for members of council to provide our input, and then the team will be refining that plan all throughout the summer. So again, there's that ongoing opportunity for input. And then the plan is for that to be coming back to a public hearing for adoption in October. I think that's correct. I don't believe there's another check-in at Urban Planning Committee, but I could be wrong on that. But Jane will.
Public hearing in October.
Okay, public hearing in October. Which again, public hearing is another opportunity for input as well. So, other big things happening. We have district planning is also ongoing this summer. We will continue to have conversations about affordable housing, what our plans are. So I'm just mentally going through some of the reports we were looking at in the look ahead. Of course, going into fall, we'll be having our fall supplementary operating budget adjustment. So it's just a time we have a 4-year budget, and then every year we just kind of have a check-in to see where we're at and if we need to make any adjustments there. I'll be looking for additional investments in community safety and well-being. We have some funding there that we didn't roll out at the beginning of the year, so I'd like to continue seeing more of that get out into the community to have those impacts, positive impacts in terms of decreasing or increasing safety and well-being. Yeah, I think those are the main highlights for coming up. I'll do a last check for any online questions. No? Last check for questions in the room?
Tree protection.
Oh, well, I think we were just about, tree protection. Great question. So yeah, we had a really good conversation about how we protect trees in our city. There was discussion of potentially having a protection, tree protection on private property bylaw. So that's something that's been adopted in other communities across Canada. So I'll say that protecting trees, maintaining trees is an incredibly important part of building a beautiful and resilient city. I think the loss of any tree is something that we want to be avoiding, but considering trade-offs is really important as well. So I think that when we lose trees, in the effort of creating more housing choices and more options for people to live in our mature neighborhoods where there's access to transit, walkable communities, I think that's a trade-off that I'm open to having. Anywho, I digress. I moved a motion around developing a roadmap of how we increase protection for trees on both private and public property in Edmonton. I think that the private tree bylaw is maybe the 10th step, and we're maybe on the 3rd step. And so I'd like to make sure that we go through all the different tools that we can bring to bear on protecting private trees. What we've heard from other jurisdictions is that private tree bylaws can be very difficult to implement, and I think that our efforts are better spent looking at our landscaping requirements. So right now there is a requirement to plant trees when you're building new homes. Let's make sure that that's actually happening, that we're seeing that planting happening, that we're enforcing that. Looking for greater incentives to retain trees on property. So again, a lot of steps I think we can get through before, potentially in the long run, a private tree protection bylaw on private property, but not there yet. We've just had some new folks visit us.
We were just walking through. We were invited to come and meet our owners. We
great. Oh, well, thank you. Thanks for joining. I'm Anne.
Hi, Ann.
Which, hi, which neighborhood do you live in?
Rossdale.
Oh,
North
Rossdale.
Rossdale.
Excellent,
Yeah.
excellent.
Yeah, the home of the non-existent dog park.
Oh. Yes, yes. I think there are some ongoing conversations about that.
Well, yeah, there should be, but, you know, it's interesting, you guys did the temporary pop-ups, but you've still kind of managed not to include the downtown, in particular, your riding, which is kind of disappointing, because we've lived in your riding for 22 years now.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we were able to get one of the pop-up parks in Oliver, which was a great addition, I think, in the Oliver Park where the Community League building used to be. I've been really pushing for more of those. But what the team did is they looked at the distribution of existing dog parks in the city and then looked to focus those pop-up parks where there were gaps sort of in the provision. Something we were talking a bit about budget, our December budget, and we didn't end up funding, I don't think we funded the dogs in public space, so that was a project that would have increased some of those pop-up parks, increased some of those options. So that's something I'm hoping we can revisit.
Well, you know, and the thing is, though, you have all ours would cost you 100, maybe 50 yards of chain link fence, because we have that Epcor land that was donated right behind the Rossdale Community League. They have their nice little gardens there.
Yeah.
Has fence down the middle of that,
Yeah.
existing infrastructure cost nothing.
Yeah.
And yet, you know, it would just be an easy experimental place because the closest we have is an 11-kilometer drive to your place the ones, the pop-ups, it's out by Westmount, if I'm not mistaken, in Southern Coronation. I have the information.
Okay.
I looked at it. But, you know, it'd be nice to have something a little more central. You know, I'm 58 now, I don't like walking up the hill as much as I
Yeah.
used to, but,
Yeah, well, I think, I don't know that the question was so much one of infrastructure as it was in terms of community consensus about what people wanted in that space.
wow, yeah. It's a very dominant, small oligarchical group that manages that particular community league, and there have been significant changes in the demography there over the last, I'm not one of them though, I'm the old guy, so I've been around.
Yeah, well, I think it's a great point, and I think it really speaks to, the value we could see in investing in the Dogs in Public Space strategy to make sure we have the resources to do more of that consultation and those installations.
Well, yeah, you could, more than one in your constituency would probably do you well.
Yeah, I mean, we do, just to clarify, we do have, there was the pop-up one in Oliver, we have the two downtown in Alex Dakota and the
Right.
arena.
The arena one's gone. You took that back, didn't you?
No, the arena one is there.
That was Kate's too, though. That wasn't us. That was.
Oh, yeah. It's there.
And it was.
Riverdale took advantage of the dog parks and rinks, so they had one in their. I don't know if did Westmount have? Oh, but they've got the long linear park,
Yeah,
so the
I think
grass
that's
park.
one of the pop-ups is up that way, if I'm not mistaken. It's out kind of Coronation Park over in that.
Oh,
area.
maybe,
Yeah.
I haven't seen that.
But, no, and that's fair, but I guess, that is something I really wish you would look a little bit more seriously at, rather
Sure.
than the voice of the few and the voice of the many. And then the other thing, I guess, comes down to is public safety, because, the other thing is there's zero enforcement on our trails. And there will be a day when someone gets badly injured by people who, A, do not have a bike belt on. It is mandatory, it's a law, which no one enforces. And I get swished probably once every 2 days with my dog. I had one of my neighbors pull over with his dog and asked how long I thought it would be before somebody died, because people are going by on scooters, don't know how to use them. You know what, it's just mayhem out there. And bike belts would be one start. There should be some enforcement. There should be, and a little bit more. There's got to be some. You guys spend a ton of dough on public knowledge type of. You'll hand out leaflets on how to make the streets better for controlling garbage, but at the same time, when people are gonna get run down by people because these guys are riding at 60 kilometers an hour. They're going by me with a dog that I have to keep on a tight leash, because if that dog gets out 3 feet and they don't ring their bell, it's gonna take the dog out.
Yeah,
And it
yeah.
happens all the time. You know, I mean, I sound like a crotchety old guy, but to be brutally honest with you, I'm not the only one. People are seeing it all the time, and there's just zero enforcement. And it's something as simple. All I ever say to them is just ring your freaking bell.
Mhm.
So all you gotta do, I'll step to the side, as long as I know you're coming.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, I don't walk with headphones on, and I don't, I like the River Valley. I enjoy it. I listen. The silence, the sounds of silence.
yeah.
That's all that.
Yeah. Oh, I know. I could sing you that whole song if you wanted. Yeah, no, it's a great point. We were talking earlier about traffic safety, our Vision Zero, and that's all, all conflicts, right?
Yeah,
In terms of
Vision
individuals.
Zero, you know what, you've got probably more mayhem going on the River Valley trails than you do in the public driving area. Like, to be brutally honest with you,
I
it's
mean,
crazy, it's mayhem.
Yeah, I mean, the data wouldn't necessarily support that. Like, the traffic fatalities that we see are with vehicles and pedestrians on the roads.
Yeah.
I think your question is a really interesting one. Something I've been thinking about. So I have not yet converted to an e-bike, but e-bikes are increasingly in our environment, and they are capable of achieving
35
significant
kilometers
speeds,
an hour.
right? Yeah, so I think that's going to be an ongoing conversation about how we balance all the different users. We've actually through, I think, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, or it may have been Alberta municipalities. Sorry, I can't remember if it was at the provincial or federal level. But we're looking to it must be at the provincial. We're looking to the province to come up with a regulatory framework for electric scooters, because right now everything is under an exception. We don't have any regulations for privately owned electric scooters. So definitely a gap there right now.
Yeah.
And
Another revenue stream license,
hmm,
there you go,
yeah,
because I still pedal my bike, so.
yeah, me too.
There you go.
Like a chunk.
And that just builds on the case for something down in the River Valley for the dogs, because you know what, again, animals are gonna get smoked. And it's just a matter of time. If you're not seeing stats yet, it's because people aren't making noise, but it's gotta be happening, because I get flown by constantly. And you know what, and the bikes are getting aggressive. Like, one of our neighbors told me that, she said, ring your bell. The guy stopped, jumped off his bike and came at her. There's a woman with a dog this big. So, I mean, you know what, it's a powder keg, and I'm just bringing you, it's an opportunity to speak to my councilors.
Yeah, that's what this is. Yeah, appreciate it.
So anyways, I'll leave you with that thought, and it would be wonderful if you guys would maybe have some more open conversations with the entire, not just the Rossdale Community League, but the entire community surrounding that area, like with Riverdale and
Well, I would encourage you to sign up for my newsletter. So I do sort of a quarterly community conversation. We were in Riverdale last, was that March? End of April. So yeah, so we've been at Queen Mary Park. I guess we've only done those 3 in person. So Queen Mary Park, Riverdale, and then the others have been online. But we're downtown today. Happy to come down to Rossdale too. But that's what these community conversations are for. They're open to the whole board, and really about having these conversations. Oh yeah, but yeah, you can sign up for my newsletter, and then we'll be back. Yeah, thank you. Oh no, that's just fine. That's what I'm here for. Thank you so much for coming down. Great. Any other questions that have come in online? Okay. Other questions from the floor?
Maybe if we could talk about the high-level bridge rehabilitation
Ooh.
and where that's at in terms of budget.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So that was a very hard decision for me at budget time. So we ended up decreasing that project by 70 million, which took away from that the upper walkway, so the high line, high level line. But what we got not a guarantee for, but what we achieved at budget was a commitment that the design work going forward, if we were to come up with $70 million, there wouldn't be any like reworking redesigning costs. So they're going, you know, the team is moving ahead to design the funded portions of the bridge. But again, with the recognition that we could come in with $70 million to make sure that the High Line can happen as part of that. So that's going to be a major priority for me in this upcoming budget. Again, there's lots of moving pieces with our capital budget. There may be some room that's created by some of the investments that we've received from other orders of government. It's a big price tag, but I think that the long-term legacy of that would be absolutely huge. And the opportunity, again, we have to close down the bridge for 1 or 2 years. So to close down the bridge for 1 or 2 years and then have to close it down again, you know, 10 years later to the high level line, I think there's just such an opportunity to do it all at once. So something I hope we can swing. It will come down to, again, if there's room in our capital budget to make it happen. But you know, even if it doesn't, there are going to be some active mode improvements in terms of extending the eastern sidewalk. So right now it's very constrained. So that's going to be built out to be a full, you know, proper, I think 3-meter pathway, which will be really positive. And the bridge itself, you know, as someone like me who doesn't really like hills, it is such an important north-south crossing that's at grade. So that will continue to be a really important route for cyclists, even if we don't get the high level line, but hopefully we can get there.
Do you see that consideration? I'm very, very interested in. I share your concerns about that. Do you have an appreciation of whether or not that is part of the scope of this project, or if it, because to me it seems though that the focus is very much on the structural elements of the bridge, which is totally understandable. But I think there's an opportunity to look at what you're talking about, and it would be a missed opportunity if we could do so. But I'm not sure if it's actually part of the scope of the project.
Yeah, like the upper deck, or it's just the
No,
improvements.
I'm talking about what you said on either side of the bridge.
Yeah.
The fact that it is the best connection from north to south in the whole city, and then on either side the approach to the bridge.
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah. So that is currently not in scope. But yeah, a huge gap there. I mean, if I had unlimited capital dollars, that intersection on the north side where 109th comes, and like in terms of the barrier it creates for people living in Oliver to get to the legislature, all the active transportation, it's such a mess in that spot. I would love to see a reconfiguration of that. It's you know, I'll say it's not in this budget cycle, but I think something to absolutely keep our eyes on. I don't know, again, we always try to, it irks me sometimes and I have to be patient, but I do ultimately respect the philosophy, which is we don't want to be tearing up infrastructure before it's reached its lifespan, right? And as poorly designed as an intersection may be, you know, it's fairly wasteful to tear up infrastructure that still has life in it. So I don't know what the condition rating is for the structures in that area, but certainly when it is time for reconstruction, I would love to see something dramatically different there. Yeah.
My question was opportunistic in a sense.
No, I love it. But that's a good reminder. I'm starting to compile. So again, it's always easy in the summer to forget that winter is coming, but I know that our budget adjustment, our fall budget adjustment process will be upon us in no time at all. So this is a really great reminder of the key things I need to be asking for and advocating for. So funding for the noisy vehicles, funding for high level line if we can find the 70 million, but yeah, all things are possible when we get creative. Great. Okay, well, I'm just noticing we are at 8:22, so we can wrap it up a bit early, I guess. Really appreciate everyone coming out tonight. Thank you to my team, as always, team and company, just as always for the seamless evening and event. Really appreciate all your help, and thanks to everyone online for joining us, and for anyone who's watching after the fact. Hope you enjoy. Please feel free to reach out anytime, ann.stevenson@edmonton.ca. I have a phenomenal team that can help address any issues you have. And then if you have questions of me in terms of my perspectives, always happy to get back to folks as well. You can sign up for a newsletter to hear about more opportunities for community conversations. And yeah, hope everyone has a really lovely rest of the evening. Thanks for coming out.